Hello, ISB psychology students. I'm your psychology teacher, Mr. Ferrand, and we're going to be preparing for our first class, which is part of Unit 1, Introduction to Psychology. And today we're going to be dealing with the theme of what is psychology. There are three essential understandings that I'd like you to walk away with after this preparation stage. The first is that the definition of psychology, which is the scientific study of mental processes and behavior and how these are affected by internal processes and the environment. Now, later on during this presentation, we're going to be looking at each of these facets of the definition in turn, and we'll be discussing this in class. The second essential understanding is that psychology is a diverse and scientific discipline. That's what sets it apart from pop psychology and astrology and things like this. It's a scientific endeavor. And also, critical for the IB, psychology requires critical thinking skills. Now, this is obviously very important in life generally, but particularly for your examinations, it's vital. First of all, let's look at defining psychology. Let's look at that IB definition again. Psychology is the scientific study of mental processes and behavior, and how these are affected by internal processes and the environment. To simplify this, just understand that psychology is about explaining human behavior. Explaining human behavior. Let's look at these two highlighted regions firstly. First of all, mental processes. Now, these are the covert or hidden behaviors. For example, memory and emotion. So these are things we can't see, but we might be able to indirectly measure. And behavior, as you might understand, is the more overt or measurable actions. These are things that we can see. For example, aggression or the behavior of people helping one another. This definition again, the second part refers to internal processes and the environment, and the effect of mental processes and behavior on these. Internal processes are the biological processes associated with hormones and genes. So we're talking about how these internal processes might affect human behavior. And the environment. We all live in a particular physical space. It has different cultural or social characteristics to it, and this is the effect of that environment on our behavior. So really, the second part refers to this balance between the environment and also the internal biological functioning of ourselves. And how does that, the interplay of those two things, how does that affect our behavior? This is really the key to the age-old nature versus nurture debate. So when we're looking at someone's behavior or particular characteristic, it's that determination of how much that characteristic is affected by nature and how much it is affected by nurture or our internal processes. Really interesting when you start to consider something like intelligence. We might discuss this later today in the next class. Now, the key word in that definition was scientific. Okay, the scientific nature of psychology distinguishes it from pop psychology, which we often see in self-help books, for example. This is oversimplified accounts based upon popular beliefs, and it's often used in self-help books. So it's not based upon evidence, it's not based upon theory, it's not testable, it's not scientific. And also a term they referred to in our textbook is psychobabble, which was coined by Rosen in 1977. This is where buzzwords are taken from psychological terminology but used out of context or used too frequently. For example, ego. We might say that person has a huge ego, but Freud didn't really use it in that context when he was originally talking about it. And we'll discuss more about that later in the course. Now, I also mentioned in the beginning that psychology is a very diverse branch of science, and it incorporates a wide variety of different facets. So for example, psychology integrates a variety of the natural and social sciences. So the natural sciences, we're looking at biology and chemistry and physics. There's a big biological element to psychology. And one of our facets, which we'll be dealing with in this course, is biological psychology. It also incorporates sociology and also anthropology, these deeper look at the influences of society, and one of our levels of analysis is socio-cultural, and also anthropology, this interaction of human beings and how they behave in certain situations. There's also a wide variety of data collection procedures. So for example, we might use traditional experiments, laboratory experiments. We might scan the brains for neuropsychology, and we might even conduct interviews or case studies. And psychology can deal with a wide range of topics. So for example, we might look at group processes, conflict, love, body language, emotion, sex. All of these things can be dealt under the umbrella of psychology, and many of these we're going to deal with in this course. This interaction and integration of many different facets of science actually leads at times to the creation of entirely new fields of research. So the example they use in our book is neuroeconomics. This is combining neuroscience, economics, and psychology to investigate consumer decision making. So the example in the book is when certain people are faced with a high price in a shopping situation, particular areas of their brain are lit up. So again, we see this neuroscience, economics, psychology blend to create an entirely new area of research. The IB takes this broad diversity into account, and it considers psychology from 3 different perspectives, or levels of analysis. So we'll be discussing these levels of analysis a lot. The first one, and the one we're going to start with in the first term, is biological level of analysis, which I call biopsych. This is the effect of physiology and genetics on behavior. Cognitive psych, or cog-psych, is the effect of mental processes on behavior. And sociocultural psych, or soc-psych, soc-psych, is the effect of the environment and culture on our behavior. And this is one I find, as a world traveler and a person who has lived in many different locations on the planet, this is one I find particularly exciting. This is the representation you might see in the IB Biology Guide. You can't quite make it out there, but it represents a microscope with 3 different lenses. Looking at the stage of the microscope where behavior is written. It represents the idea that behavior cannot be understood unless you look at it from the cognitive, the biological, and the social-cultural aspect. And we'll be discussing this more in class. And also, you would have seen this book, you'll be using this book this year. The book is structured according to these 3 levels of analysis. So please keep these in mind as we move through the course. It determines the structure of the course, and it also determines the structure of the exams as well. Okay, psychology as a science, we continually seek to understand human behavior in many ways. Perhaps if we can understand these behaviors, there is a belief that we can explain them and control them. However, little warning, human behavior is very complex. So within psychology, there are few definitive answers or easy solutions. And you must be prepared for that. In physical sciences or in chemistry, you might be more used to getting explainable, observable results. Psychology is not like that. It's a little bit more grey. Historically, people may have used the zodiac sign, the astrology, to help explain behavior. They've used self-help books, particularly throughout the 80s, with books like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in certain cultures, and even within our own culture, when we want to understand or explain behavior, we might seek an elder person, a person we respect. This is a person from Afghanistan, part of the Yurga, which is when people have a problem in the village, they take this for decisions to this group of older people. Now, why is psychology a science? It's based upon theories and empirical studies. Now, empirical investigations or studies, and founded by documented research evidence. These theories help to explain a phenomenon by summarizing, organizing, and explaining observations or predicting future events. So just like in biology or chemistry, your work is founded by theoretical explanations. However, again, human behavior is incredibly complex, so psychological theories are probable rather than certain, and are always open to some doubt. So again, walk into the psychology room knowing that there will be some doubt there. You will get very few 100% concrete yeses or nos, and that's part of the fun. That's why I really enjoy it, even more so than biology at times, because of that grey area which provides great discussion. An example of a theory that they use in the book is Albert Bandura's self-efficacy theory. Now he states here that people's beliefs about their abilities have a profound effect on those abilities. Ability is not a fixed property. There is a huge variability in how you perform. People who have a sense of efficacy bounce back from failures. They approach things in terms of how to handle them rather than worrying about what can go wrong. So when you read about Mr. Bandura in the textbook, you'll see his belief is our beliefs determine how well we might perform in given situations. Now, psychology as a science, it also uses empirical investigation. When a researcher collects and analyzes data in order to investigate a psychological phenomenon. Now we're going to be looking at lots of studies, lots of examples of studies, some briefly, some in detail, but in every case you're going to be evaluating that study, and I'll talk more about that later when we speak of critical thinking. It's an incredibly important skill, and it's one that doesn't come naturally. You need to train that skill, and we're going to do that together, and it's a skill that becomes particularly important on the exams, the final exams. If you cannot do this analysis of studies and present your judgments, then it's going to be very difficult to score in that top brand. Empirical investigations involve research which can be observed or measured. And critical, as I've mentioned, both theories and studies need to be evaluated for their strengths and weaknesses. And we'll talk more about how to do that. This is a classic study that we might use as an example later by Stanley Milgram. And I might even put this on the website for you to look at later. Critical thinking. This is the ability and willingness to assess claims and make objective judgments on the basis of well-supported reasons and evidence, rather than emotions, beliefs, myths, and anecdotes. So important words here, I think, is willingness. It's not just the ability, but it's the idea that when you are faced with information in this crazy world of ours, you make that choice to critically reflect upon it. And you base that reflection on evidence. Not what someone has told you, not what the general population believe, but on evidence. Critical thinking is vital, particularly in today's world, because we're being saturated by information from sources like the internet, television, all different types of media. Many sources means lots of information, and finding information is no longer the key. It's actually sorting out what is good information and what is not. Scientists, and psychology is a science, as I've said, should be skeptical and critical. Now, critical doesn't necessarily mean negative, but it means that you evaluate the theories and the studies for strengths and weaknesses. So you're looking at both the pros and the cons, the positives and the negatives. Now, critical thinking, it's a difficult thing to define. What is it? King and Kitchener in 1994 outlined 8 different facets of critical thinking. The first is they question assumptions and biases. They evaluate readily available evidence and relate it to a theory or opinion. It considers alternative interpretations and avoids emotional reasoning. Critical thinkers also do not jump to oversimplified conclusions. They know that plausible conclusions are based upon evidence. They are willing to reassess conclusions if new information appears, and they're able to tolerate some uncertainty. So again, looking back at the 3 factors, we saw that psychology is defined as this. It is a scientific endeavor and it involves critical thinking.